Today I'm going to make a shepherd's pie, and I'm going to make it using a low-fat lamb mince and keep it quite low-fat overall. So I'm going to start off with quite a large onion. Take the top off, cut it in half. That then makes it easy to get the peel off. Leave the root attached, you're less likely to be crying. If you do all your preparation before starting to do any cooking, it's going to be a lot easier. Any bits, make sure they're off the board before you start to chop. So I want quite a fine dice. So what I'm going to do is cut towards the root, but leaving it still attached, and then cut across. Closer together your cuts are, the smaller your diced onion will be. So it should just fall into nice small pieces. As this is quite a large onion, I just need to make sure I cook it really well, otherwise it's going to taste too strong. So that's going to go into my bowl to use later. Next thing I'm going to prepare is a carrot. So take off the ends. I'm going to use a peeler. Do the bottom half first. Much easier and less likely to cut yourself on the peeler. Turn it round, do the other end. Obviously you can get different types of peelers, but same principle. Just avoid cutting yourself with a blade because they can be really sharp. Clean your board. Now, because this is quite big, it's going to be a bit difficult to handle. So I'm going to cut it in half first. Then I'm going to cut it again. I'm not going to worry about it going too tiny. It's just going to be simmering in the mince mixture for long enough to soften it. So I'm going to cut it into batons or sticks to start with. Then I'm going to line those up and cut it into dice. So repeat the other half. Obviously you can have more or less carrot in yours, it's up to you. You could dice celery into it. By the time that's cooked down, it tastes quite a lot different to raw celery. And again, once this is finished, I'm just going to be putting it into a bowl ready to cook. Next thing I'm going to prepare is some garlic, and a nice easy way to get the garlic out of the skin. I'm just going to cut off the root end and crush it. The skin should then just pop off quite easily. So it's up to you if you wanted to use it or leave it out, if you want to chop it or slice it or use a garlic crusher. Put them in. Crushes really easily once the skin's off. And again, I'm going to put it into a bowl ready for later. Scrape it off with a blunt knife. Don't go using one of these sharp knives on this. Or you could use a spoon. Just don't go damaging knives. I've now got all the ingredients for the meat sauce ready, apart from herbs and seasoning. So I've got a cup of peas. They're frozen, so they'll defrost probably before I use them. I've got my onion. I've got about 400 mils of stock. I've used chicken, but obviously if you're making it with lamb mince, lamb stock would be nice, but it works well with either. My carrot, my crushed garlic, some tomato puree, a tablespoon or two. I'm putting one in to start with, and then I'll see if I need the second. And lamb mince. So I'm going to open the lamb mince before I start. Just go around it with a knife or a scissors and remove the packaging. So I'm now ready to get my wok on, or saucepan, or whatever you're going to use, with a tiny amount of oil in it, and get the onions cooking. So I've now got a really small amount of oil in the pan. My onions are going to go in, and carrots are going to go in, and I'm going to saute them, or cook them, stir them about a little for 5, maybe 10 minutes. I want to get a good bit of colour on them without burning them and cooking them too quickly. That's been cooking for about 10 minutes now, so what I'm going to do is push the veg out of the way, get the mince, hold it with a wooden spoon, flip it upside down, you'll get a bit of paper underneath. You can then scrape that straight into the packet, and then you would just start breaking it up with a wooden spoon and fry it, keeping it moving until it goes from pink to brown. Exactly the same so far as if you were making a bolognese. It's taken just over 5 minutes to get to this stage, and I'm now going to add in all my flavourings and seasonings. So a little bit of salt. You can taste it later and see if it needs any more. Some pepper. I'm going to put some dried parsley. Obviously, if you've got fresh parsley, chop it up and add that in. Always dip it into your hand first. You don't want to accidentally put way too much in. You can add more, but it's really difficult to take it out. I'm also going to use a little bit of thyme. That's quite strong when it's dried, so you really don't want a lot of that. If you've got rosemary and you like it, you can add that in. I'm also going to put a little bit of balsamic vinegar. Just a little shake, it's probably about a teaspoon or so. And a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. All these flavours are optional, but they build up and you get quite a nice taste in the whole thing. So I'm also going to add in my garlic and tomato puree at this point. If you want a thicker sauce, you might want to sprinkle in a little bit of flour in a few minutes before you add your stock. So they've had a good mix through, and I'm now going to add in the stock. If you put a little bit too much, it doesn't matter, because you're going to simmer it and reduce it anyway, and that will thicken the mixture. So it might look a little bit runny at the moment. It is going to simmer and evaporate a lot of that liquid. And put the peas in a bit later. They don't need to go in immediately because they would just cool it down and I'd have to bring it back to the boil. So I'm going to simmer that for about 15-20 minutes. At that point, if it's a bit runny, I might sprinkle a little bit of flour into it or just reduce it a bit longer. If you're going to boil and mash potatoes to go on top, I would start getting them on now. So you'd have a pan of salted water, peeled and chopped potatoes, and put them on to boil. They probably take about the same sort of time. I'm going to use smash. I've got a tub of smash and he's using, so I'm going to use that and cheat. Once you've got your mashed potato, or made up your mash, mixed in with the salt and pepper, I'm also going to add in an egg, just to enrich it a bit. It'll also help if your mash is a little bit soft, it will set it. If you want to, you could add some milk or butter to get a nice spreadable consistency. So beat the egg well and then using a fork or a spoon, doesn't really matter which, just mix it through. And obviously this is going to cool down a little bit, make it a bit easier to handle while my mince mixture is cooking. Now would be the time, if you're going to just continue and go straight on to bake it, time to get your oven on, approximately 200 degrees, but everything's going to be cooked, so it's basically just getting that mash nice and golden and a bit crispy on top. So if you put it a bit hotter, it wouldn't really matter if it cooked faster, or you could go for a lower, slower cook. My mixture is now cooked and it tastes lovely, but it is still a little bit runny and I don't want to evaporate it off too much. So what I'm going to do is get a teaspoon, that's a measuring teaspoon of cornflour, mix that through, bring it back to the boil, and that will just help to thicken up those juices into a nice gravy. I brought that back to the boil and it's got quite a nice consistency to it now. So now I'm going to add in the peas. If I did it earlier, it would have cooled it down because obviously you can see they're still frozen. So I'm going to mix that through and I'm going to give it just another 5 minutes to finish off. Before you put it in your dish though, you want to have a little taste just to check you're happy with the seasoning. Same with the mash, taste it, see what you think of it. Now my filling's cooked, I'm going to put it into my dishes. I'm going to use 2 because it's not all going to fit into one. I'm just going to scoop it in, level it off. You could do individual ones, you could do one big one. Totally up to you depending on what dishes you have. To put the mash on, you could pipe it or you could just spoon it like this. Don't push it down into your meat mixture. Just use a spoon, push it off with another spoon. I'm going to flatten it out in a minute, so you don't want it too fussy. Just enough to cover the area. Then going to smooth it out a little with the back of the spoon. If you cooked it like this, it would look a little bit plain and it wouldn't really brown as nicely. So what I'm going to do is to just do some fork marks, and where we've got all those lines, it will just brown and crisp up a little bit more. So that now needs to go in the oven, and it should take up to about 20 minutes, and basically when it looks cooked and that mash is crisp through, then it's done. Okay, so when it comes out, it should be crisp and golden on top and nice and bubbly around the sides. So you can see that that mash is fully cooked.